Kia ora and welcome back to Wellywood Wargaming. My name's Damon and we are here to talk shit about Necromunda. In this episode, we're getting into another gang guide. I'm on my last few now. I'd just like to say quickly though, I'm in really good spirits at the moment. I'm so chuffed and amazed by how many subscribers I've got now. I'm nearly at 1,000 subscribers and I've only been doing this for a couple of months, and I just, for something so niche, Necromunda, you know, just doing Necromunda videos, I never ever expected to be getting this many subscribers and followers, and it's just awesome. So I'd really like to thank you all first before we even get into this. So thank you. So there's quite a lot of news that I've got going on this week, but I'm going to talk about that in some other videos. But I have got a bit more time on my hands, so I'm actually going to be able to do a few more videos this week. I know that my rate of videos is pretty much one a day at the moment, which is crazy when I actually do work 6 days a week in 2 jobs, and I'm a parent. I'm not quite sure how I'm managing to do it. Maybe there's some sort of weird power that I'm using, whether it's chronomancy here or not, I'm not really sure, but I'm managing to do it anyway, and I'm not too stressed about it. I really enjoy it, so it's you know, things are easy when you enjoy them anyway. So with this gang guide, of course, without further ado, we're going to get into the gang guide this time for, well, we have to just get into House Goliath, don't we, really? So this book, I've got to be honest, this book is not mine, so I'm actually borrowing this off a friend who's in the current campaign at the moment. So thanks a lot for that, Al. House Goliath has always been one of my least favourites, if I'm honest, since back in the day. I don't know why exactly, but I've got to say, after spending last night and yesterday, most of yesterday actually reading this book and getting through some of the lore in it, that's completely changed, and I've now kind of really started to enjoy the fluff around House Goliath, and I actually really like them now. I'd say they're far more interesting than, say, House Orlok, maybe even Van Saar, maybe even Escher, on my level anyway, for me at least. And yeah, we've got to get into the big boys and start talking about one of the best gangs, if not the best gang in the game. Now, who are House Goliath? Now, House Goliath are former slaves, basically. They were created as slaves on Necromunda to do all the heavy work, so smelting and manufacturing stuff, basically. So they were made to be big brutes. Games Workshop has always had has had a finger in this pie of big brutes with Mohicans since the 80s, I remember, because it was something I was super into as a kid. I just thought there was nothing cooler than a big muscly guy with a black and white striped Mohican. And that came from my love of 2nd edition Blood Bowl with Morgan Thorpe, the ogre, star player back then. Basically, this whole gang is modelled after that guy. So if you're an old Hammer guy like I am, you'll know exactly what I mean, but all the old ogres back in the day pretty much resembled the current Goliaths at the moment as well, and probably around the same size as well. But anyway, I'm rambling a little bit here. So Goliaths, they were former slaves. They're now their own house, ruled by their sort of alphas, as I've come to read. They are predominantly male, generally, and they're predominantly sterile as well. However, that's changed over the recent time periods in Necromunda, and they now have not just genetic tank-born guys called vat-born, but they've now got nat-born as well, which means that Goliath babies are being born naturally from a womb. Yeah, getting into it. There's a lot of fluff to chew through, but we're not going to be doing that today. We're just going to be talking about the actual gang guide and how they operate in game, what kind of strategies you can use to make them really awesome, what you don't want to do, what you do want to do, and generally just talking about House Goliath in general, and how they relate to the current day Necromunda game. So we're going to get into it right now. So Goliath gangs in Necromunda, in terms of their strengths and weaknesses, whether they are beginner friendly, and what sort of tier I think they are at in terms of the grand scheme of things in Necromunda power levels. First and foremost, I would say that they are top tier, absolutely. Even in inexperienced hands, I would say Goliaths are right up there in tier 1. However, if you are a metagamer, if you're someone who is a little bit min-maxy, heaven forbid, there are those people in Necromunda. Personally, I don't think that's the right way to play Necromunda, but if you are that person who likes to min-max the shit out of things, then Goliaths are for you, and you can make them go from tier 1 to absolute tier 0 very, very easily with very minimal effort. And sometimes I think you can do that by accident with House Goliath as well. They're very, very powerful. Are they, well, let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses for now. In terms of the strengths, they're obviously strong. They're big, brutish, muscle-bound guys. They're very, very tough as well. They have a toughness of 4 generally throughout the gang, and they usually have a strength of 4 as well. When talking about stats though, it's a little bit awkward because we're going to be talking about something called gene smithing very soon. But we won't get into that just yet and the specifics of it, but stats out of the box, Goliaths are slow, but they're very, very strong. They're more sort of short range, mid range, close combat and heavy damage dealing weaponry. That's how they play anyway. We've got some access to some really, really good skill trees in brawn and ferocity. We've also got muscle skills as well, which we're going to talk about in a bit. But yeah, the other strengths and weaknesses that they have, I would say Goliaths are incredibly strong in that we can min-max them to hell using something called gene smithing. We're going to get into the specifics of gene smithing shortly, but it does allow you to tweak your gang individually. Each fighter, you can up their stats and pay credits for stat increases. You can also take credits off your fighters and decrease their stats as well, which is incredibly valuable. So it's entirely min-maxing basically. So if you're not familiar with that term, it just means, you know, getting the best out of your credit value of the gang pretty much. And making the most effective lists you can possibly do. In terms of the other strengths, they've got very, very good access to some very, very tasty close combat weapons that deal a lot of damage. So if they do get into close combat, you are screwed. They have a very high cool stat across the board, so if they do bottle, they're likely to stick around, which is you know, similar to Ogrins and stuff as well. But Goliaths are pretty much the coolest gang in the game. They do not freak out. Other strengths that they have is they've got an excellent super champion, similar to Escher, similar to Delac. They've got something called a Stimmer, which is ridiculously powerful if you go with the right builds and the right loadouts. But generally speaking, the fact that they're tougher than everybody else in the game, with toughness and flesh wounds being a mechanic that is a thing, they're harder to wound, thus harder to kill. Generally speaking, you're going to outlast your opponents in terms of bottles and in terms of toughness as well. Huge, huge, huge part of the game. They're less susceptible to chems, toxin, gas, things like that as well as a result. But really the key strength, the key strength in House Goliath is the fact that you can gene smith them. So yeah, there we go. In terms of the weaknesses though, there are a couple. Of course they are slow. They're slower than your average fighter with movement 4 across the board. But there are ways to mitigate that with tactics, with gene smithing, with stim slugs, things like that. The other weaknesses that they tend to have, which is not a huge one, but it really does depend, it's quite situational really, is that they've got quite low willpower stats. Now willpower stats are usually affected by corpse grinders mainly, so corpse grinders I would say are a fairly hard counter to House Goliath in some situations, not always. But so are psychic powers. There's a few psychic powers that work off willpower, and there are also some tactics cards that involve insanity and things like that also use willpower as a stat. So they can be a bit vulnerable to anything that is revolving around willpower. Same with intelligence. They've got a very low intelligence, so you're not going to be opening crates and security doors that well with your brain. You're going to be smashing them open instead, and instead getting sort of less for your troubles as well out of those crates and stuff. So that's something to consider too. I think the models are delicious. Delicious? Is that really a thing? They're beautiful models, like all Necromunda models, they're beautiful models. When I first saw them, I was kind of blown away by how much they'd improved on the aesthetic from the first iteration of Necromunda, which, to be honest, Goliaths were the poster boys of Necromunda originally, and they still are really in a lot of ways. However, Escher have sort of come into the fold now as sort of the poster girls as well. But Goliath's aesthetic in the first iteration was very similar, but sadly the sculptor who did do the metal Goliaths back in the day just didn't really hit the mark for me. I thought they were pretty dreadful models, and as a result I didn't play them purely on that. Some of the old Necromunda models were great, like the Escher and Cawdor particularly, but the Goliath ones were the worst out of the bunch, I would say, and just, to me, just looked terrible, which is why I'd never played them. However, now the models are lovely. They're big and chunky. They've got bigger bases. Really, really nice models, easy to convert, with some really cool parts, and of course they've all got that signature spiky Mohican as well, which everybody loves, and we've got a few cigars in there as well, which is awesome. So moving on, we're actually going to start talking about fighter types now and get into the nitty-gritty of the gang itself. So we've talked a bit now about the strengths and weaknesses of House Goliath, and how the gangs operate in the game. We're now going to get into the actual fighter types here, and just describe what they do, what they're good at, and what kind of equipment and weapons they can have as well as their skills too. So the first up, obviously, we're going to be talking about the leader. Now, a Goliath leader is called a Forged Tyrant. This guy is just an absolute beast, pretty much, and he's got really good stats across the board as well. So looking at the cost of this fighter, he's 135 credits, which is quite a lot for a leader. However, his stats do make up for it. So do his, his access to equipment is also very good. But like all Goliaths, we have a base movement of 4, which is slow. Now, movement 4 can be really frustrating if you're playing on 3D terrain particularly. Moving up and down levels, stairs, things like that, and just charging and trying to get in is usually bit of a problem. So movement increases are very, very valuable on Goliaths. But yeah, movement 4 across the board can be very frustrating, particularly for newer players. But there are ways to mitigate that big time. Moving on though, for a weapon skill and ballistic skill of 3 up on the Goliath Forged Tyrant, so he's equally as good at bashing people close up as he is at shooting as well, to be honest. And he has a strength and toughness of 4 too, so very strong, so he can throw grenades very far. He can also hit you very hard in the face in close combat, and he can also survive better with toughness 4 across the board in the whole gang, in fact. Toughness 4 is really good because it means you can take 4 flesh wounds before you bleed out. The flesh wounds do stack in this game, and quite often you will find that fighters accumulate flesh wounds throughout a game and can often die that way too. Now this guy's got 2 wounds, unlike your Orlok leader who's got 3. This guy's only got 2 wounds, but you can genesmith them to have more if you so wish, but we're going to talk about that in a bit. Initiative of 3 up, which is actually really good for a big guy. Of course he is your leader, so he's got higher initiative than the rest of your fighters, I believe, but initiative of 3 up is really, really good for a massive hulking brute, I would say. And this is the real big one though. He's got 3 attacks, which is excellent. So the same as an Escher leader, I believe, but it just means that he's got some real close combat focus there with a weapon skill of 3 and 3 attacks as well. He's also got a leadership of 5, a cool of 4, which is absolutely insane, which means that basically he's never running away, or very rarely anyway. He's got a willpower of 8, which I mentioned before is a weakness. A willpower of 8 is below average. We've also got an average intelligence of 7 as well, which is quite good for some big, massive brute again. But there you go. Those are your stats for the Forged Tyrant. In terms of the skill access that this guy gets though, he gets Brawn as a primary, so you've got some good skills in there with Ball Charge, what's the other one, Crushing Blow, Hurl. There are some good ones, but Brawn is generally not the best skill tree in the game. We've also got Ferocity, which is probably the best skill tree in the game. Access to skills like Nerves of Steel, True Grit, Berserker, whatnot. Nerves of Steel particularly standing out here with your call of a 4+, because if you've got Nerves of Steel on this guy, he's pretty much always standing and always being used, which is excellent to negate that movement 4 that we were talking about earlier. He's also got Leadership 2, which I don't think is quite as important on a Goliath leader. You certainly won't be using Overseer on this guy. It would be a complete waste of a miniature if you ask me. Overseer is really for a cheaper leader, I would say. Apart from that, secondary, we've got combat, muscle, and shooting actually as a secondary, but secondaries, as you know, are quite hard to access in the game. Now, as like any other leader in the game, we have gang hierarchy leader, so we've got all the rules associated with leaders. We've also got tools of the trade as well, which means you can have multiple fighter cards, meaning that you can have different weapon and equipment loadouts. And you've also got group activation 2 as well, which means that you can take 2 fighters with you in activations as well, just like any other leader in the game pretty much. Now moving on to the equipment list that the Forged Tyrant can get, this is quite nice and rich. There's lots of diversity in this list in terms of the types of weapons that you can have, and Goliaths do get a really powerful house list, I think. In terms of the basic weapons that you can get, we've got bolt guns at 55 credits, combat shotguns at 60 credits, which are cheaper for Goliath, so combat shotguns are great, especially when they're cheap. We've also got your regular shotgun with solid and scatter for 30 credits, and we've also got executioner and inferno ammo available on your house list for those too, which is very tasty. We've also got stub cannons, which are an interesting weapon we're going to talk about later, and they are Goliath specific. They're 20 credits, they're okay. In terms of pistols though, we've got some good choices here as well. We've got the Combi bolt pistol hand flamer, which I don't personally rate. It's 110 credits, very expensive for what it does. We've got the Combi bolt pistol plasma pistol, which again, it's okay, but it's 80 credits. But the pick of the bunch for the Combi pistols for me is actually the stub gun plasma pistol, which is 40 credits, and pretty good actually, because a regular plasma pistol is 50 credits. This guy is, you know, you can't have maximal, so you've got the low profile on the plasma, but you've also got the stub gun as a backup. I think is actually quite good for 40 credits. And we've also got bolt pistols, hand flamers, and stub guns with dum-dums there as well in terms of the pistols for your leader. Your special weapons, we've got some combi weapons here as well. So we've got the bolter flamer for 175 credits, which to me is a complete rip-off. We've got the combi weapon bolter grenade launcher, which is quite an interesting one at 80 credits. But again, these combi weapons, usually you're better off just taking the actual real version of it. But really it's just it's the compact nature of it that gives you extra space in your inventory for weapons. You've also got a bolter melter for 165 credits, which is a very powerful weapon but incredibly expensive luxury there. And you've got flamers, grenade launchers, and melter guns. Grenade launchers are great for Goliaths because you haven't really got the highest ballistic skill. I'd say grenade launchers are quite important for Goliaths, whether they're on your specialists, your champions, or whoever. In terms of heavy weapons though, we've got some really nice choices here. We've got heavy bolters, which as we know are absolutely ridiculously powerful. We've got heavy flamers, which are trash and should just go in the bin, and we don't talk about those. We've got heavy stubbers for 130 credits, and we've got the interesting Goliath specific crumper or rivet cannon, which is an incredibly short ranged heavy weapon, which is quite good actually, but it's only got a maximum range of 9 inches, which is rather terrible. However, you can move and shoot with it, so it's quite a cheap option as well at 70 credits. But 70 credits for something that's only got a 9-inch range is not going to see much use in the game generally, but I do like them, they're kind of fun. But yeah, generally speaking, I don't think you're going to go for that. We've also got missile launchers, which are, you know, it's not available for most house lists actually, but they are for Goliaths. They come with frag and crack missiles, and they're 165 credits. So very expensive, but very, very good because they can shoot 5-inch frag templates around the place at strength 5, I believe. So there you go. We've also got multi-melters for 180 credits, which are just death and destruction for anybody that you're facing. But 180 credits is an awful lot of money for anything. So those are your heavy weapon choices. Again, this is all just for your leader, so you do have an incredibly rich amount of stuff to draw from. In terms of close combat weapons, we have your axes, brute cleavers. Brute cleavers are specific to House Goliath, and they're pretty good. We've got chain swords, chain axes, which are arguably the best close combat weapon in the game for credit value, I would say. Chain axes, 25 credits. They are fantastic. They're actually cheaper than they are for anyone else as well, so I would say chain axes are an absolute must on Goliath gangs. We've got fighting knives, mauls, power axes, power hammers, renderizers, which are Goliath specific massive axes, two-handed axes which cause lots and lots of damage. We've also got servo claws, interestingly, which never see any use in a Goliath list generally. Spudjackers, which is a giant monkey wrench, and they're pretty good because they've got knockback. And we've got your two-handed axe and your two-handed hammer, which we don't really talk about. Other than that, in terms of grenades, we've got blasting charges, frag grenades, crack grenades, smoke grenades, and stun grenades. Now, in terms of grenades, I like grenades a lot in the game, normally on most gangs, but for Goliaths, they're even more attractive because you have strength 4 across the board. Now that means that when you're throwing a grenade, instead of throwing it 9 inches, you get to throw it 12 inches, which is excellent. So just bear that in mind. Grenades are better for Goliaths than they are for most other gangs, except Ogryns. In terms of armor types, we've got carapace armor here. We can have light and heavy if you really want to go that far and spend 100 credits on some armor. And we've also got furnace plates, which are actually excellent for 5 credits. Now, furnace plates from your front arc is basically mesh armor. Behind you is a 6 up. So you've got a 5 up save there for 5 credits. It's not bad. You're usually going to be facing people anyway. So really, really good price for quite a good armor there. And of course you can combine that with an undersuit as well, and it makes it a 4+ from your front arc. So very nice. In terms of the weapon accessories, we've got gun shrouds, which is really, really strange having that on a Goliath, making them sneaky all of a sudden. I think that must just be a misprint. We've also got suspensors on your house list to make those heavy weapons really, really work, and telescopic sights too. In terms of your status items and exotic beasts, your leader can have a pet Sump Croc, but we're going to talk about Sump Croc soon. But they are 130 credits and actually one of the better pets in the game, I would say. And that is your Forged Tyrant. So moving on to the next fighter type now. This one is basically your mini Forged Tyrant. He's called your Forge Boss. Now this is your regular champion. It's not your super champion, it's your regular champion. So this guy has his own role, but he's quite similar to your Forged Tyrant in some ways. His stats just aren't quite as good. So we've got a movement of 4 again. A weapon skill of 3, which is the same as your leader, which is good. So he's more close combat-y, and he's got a ballistic skill of 4. So that does make this guy slightly better in close combat than he is at shooting, but don't let that put you off shooting because he does have some good options in terms of weapons. Strength and toughness 4. We've got wounds 2, initiative 4, so he's not quite as agile as his leader. He's got an average initiative, which is actually still pretty good for a big brute. Attacks 2, so 1 less attack than your leader. A leadership of 6, cool of 5, willpower of 8, and an intelligence of 8. So terrible willpower and intelligence, very good cool. And very good leadership too, actually. And this guy's 100 credits, which I think is actually really, really good value. Now this guy also has, the gang hierarchy champion rule. He's also got tools of the trade, and he's also got group activation 1 as well, like any other champion has usually. In terms of skill access, you get the same skill access than you do on your leader. So we've got primary being brawn and ferocity. No leadership though. But again, skills like true grit, berserker, fearsome, whatever, all the ferocity skills are good. And this guy doesn't have any limits on the types of equipment you can give him, so you can give him heavy weapons if you wish to as well. And usually I think the heavy weapon is pretty good on this guy, if you are going to go the heavy weapon route. Although your leader has got the better ballistic skill, so perhaps the heavy bolt on your leader might be the best choice. In terms of weapons though, he's got exactly the same options, pretty much throughout, has the same options, same sort of combi weapons, same close combat weapons exactly, same grenade choices, same heavy weapon choices, and the only thing that he doesn't have is heavy carapace armor. He can get light carapace armor, but no heavy carapace armor. Can still get a Sump Croc as well, but every single bit of equipment otherwise is exactly the same. So this guy's role, I would say, generally is a little bit more close combat focused, so this guy can be really good with a renderizer and some stim slug stashes, things like that, a pair of chain axes, whatever you really want to do. However, the next fighter type is the real close combat fighter, so you can give this guy a bit of a mixture. Ballistic skill 4 is certainly not bad, it's just average, but it does make you look at it and go, you know what, he's got weapon skill 3+, I might as well use it. So perhaps a bit of a mixed fighter there, but it's completely up to you how you want to build this guy. And again, we have gene smithing to call on as well if we do really wish to do that. Getting into the next fighter, this is your super champion for House Goliath. So this is the equivalent of a Death Maiden for House Escher, the equivalent of a Nachtghoul for House Delac. This guy is an absolute beast. Stimmers are Goliaths who've gone a bit too far on the juice. This guy is roided up to the max, and he's about twice the size of your average Goliath brute as well. But he's just huge, and he's very, very potent in close combat generally. So, movement 4. again, he's quite slow, which is annoying for a close combat focused fighter. However, he does get, you can do things to mitigate that a little bit, as I've said before. His weapon skill is a 2-up, so he's fantastic at hitting you, but his ballistic skills are 4-up, so again, very average. So comparing him to the normal champion, this guy's even more focused for close combat, of course. He's got a strength and toughness of 4 again, 2 wounds, an initiative of 3-up, which is actually, again, not too bad. And this guy's got 3 attacks, similar to your leader too, so more attacks than your other champion too. Now he's got a leadership of 8, a cool of 4, which is again insanely good, a willpower of 7, and an intelligence of 8. So his stats are actually closer to your leader. And he's 125 credits, so his cost is 2. In terms of the special rules around this guy, he's got tools of the trade, so you can have different weapon loadouts. He does not have group activation, so you can't group activate him with other people. So you do sacrifice that a little bit on this guy, but it depends whether you're really that kind of guy who group activates a lot. With Goliath, you're usually running a lower crew because they're more expensive, so I would say you're not doing as much group activation generally. This guy also has something called Combat Chem Stash. Now he can, whenever this fighter is activated, it may choose to use his combat chems. Until the end phase of this round, the fighter gains an additional D3 attacks. However, if the dice roll is a natural 1, the fighter instead suffers a bad reaction and its attack's characteristic is reduced to 1 until the end phase, which is quite funny. But to be honest, even with 1 attack, this guy hits like a brick shithouse. So there you go. In terms of the skills that this guy gets, we've got Ferocity obviously is the main one, and to be honest, this guy needs Nerves of Steel more than anyone else, if you ask me, just to guarantee that he's standing and ready to charge people. He also gets Muscle as a primary, and we're going to go into the muscle skills shortly, but muscle skills are interesting, to say the least. There's a couple of good ones in there. Like any skill tree, there's a couple of good ones, the rest are shockers, but we'll talk about those in a bit. Now this guy, being your super champion, like any other super champion, does get a much more restricted list of equipment here. So there is only 1 pistol, and that's a stub gun. I actually think that a backup pistol on a stimmer is actually really important, and for 5 credits, more than worth it. You just kind of need a backup weapon on this guy. If he is solely close combat focused, you need something just to be able to get people when you get frustratedly pinned all the time if you don't have Nerves of Steel. Anyway, I'm rambling already. In terms of heavy weapons, he gets a unique heavy weapon that's only available to the stimmer, and that is called the Assault Grenade Launchers. These are twin-linked grenade launchers. They're rapid fire and they're kind of weird, but kind of cool. There's 65 credits as well, which is not too bad. If you want to get smoke grenades on them, it's 20 credits, and if you want to get crack grenades on them, it's 30 credits. But they come with stun rounds, which is pretty cool, and frag grenades as well. So you can, yeah, we'll talk about the specifics of this weapon shortly when we actually look at the weapon stats as well. Close combat weapons wise though, you get fighting knives, a pulverizer, which is serrated axe for 30 credits. We also get paired pulverizers, which of course paired means that you can, it doubles your base attacks characteristics. So all of a sudden with paired pulverizers, you're looking at 6 attacks, charging is 7, and then we've got the offhand weapon, so we're looking at 8 attacks charging with paired pulverizers, which is very nice. You can have a renderizer serrated axe, which is very good as well, but doesn't give you as many attacks. And you can also have spudjackers and paired spudjackers, which is an option too. So paired spudjackers is still 8 attacks with knockback. It's not bad at all, and it's much cheaper at 25 credits as well. So 25 credits as opposed to paired pulverizers at 50 credits. I'm kind of tempted to cut back on the credits sometimes and actually go with the paired spudjackers. I really like spudjackers. They're not going to do as much damage, but you can knock people into buildings for the extra damage, and you can also knock people off rafters and things like that as well, which is quite fun. But 2 giant monkey wrenches, what's not to like about that? Now you can have lots of different grenade types here, including melter bombs actually, which is interesting, for 60 credits. I wouldn't use those though. And the only armor type you're going to take on these guys is furnace plates as well. You can't have any other armor types. Furnace plates are good enough though, it's kind of all you need. Personal equipment, you get armored undersuits, bio boosters, drop rigs, respirators, skin blades, and stim slug stashes. I'd say the stim slug stash is the pick of the bunch there, but you can also have that armored undersuit for some extra bit of armor too. And they can also have Sump Crocs, which is kind of cool. So you can have your stimmer with a Sump Croc helping protect him as well, which is quite a nice thing to do. And those are your champions. Moving on to the next fighter type now. We're going to be moving into the prospects and juves now for House Goliath. We've talked about both the champion types and the leader. Now we're going to be talking about the Goliath Forgeborn. Now this is your prospect, so similar to your Wrecker for House Orlok, your Wild Runner for House Escher, your Psygeists for House Delac. This guy is just nowhere near as good as any of those. Yeah, I still can't, I've read this book a little bit, I've played against Goliath, I've played with Goliaths, I can't really find a place for these guys. You're going to be screaming at me saying you're wrong, there's a place for these guys, but I just don't see it over the juice. But I'm going to just explain the differences here in terms of the stats and the cost and stuff. But your Goliath Forgeborn prospect is 35 credits, right? He's got a movement of 5, so he does have movement 5, which is the only redeeming quality I can actually see here, being faster than the rest of your gang. But movement isn't everything. He's got a weapon skill of 4, which is okay. Ballistic skill of 5, which is fairly terrible. Strength of 3 and a toughness of 4. So he's still got that Goliath toughness, however he's not as strong and he's not as good at shooting either. 1 wound, initiative 4, attacks 1, and he's got a leadership of 9, a cool of 7, which is fairly terrible. Well, it's average, but it's terrible for Goliath. And then we've got a willpower and intelligence of 9, which is both terrible. Now, he's a prospect, so he has something called hot-headed, which means that you know, if he dies next to you, you don't freak out and have to make a cool check because no one cares about him. He's a fast learner, so he spends less XP when he's leveling up on the same level ups, if that makes sense. And he gets promoted to forge boss or a stimmer as well, eventually. But in terms of the skill access here, this is another weird one for me, and this is again, I think something that I don't like about them is that the only primary table they get is combat, which is a bit weird on these guys. No ferocity, and ferocity isn't even a secondary. In fact, shooting is, which is very odd. Of course, these guys won't get access to skills straight away, but it is what it is. In terms of the equipment list, it's very limited for these guys. Very, very limited, actually. So they've only got 1 armor type, and that's furnace plates, and that's fine. In terms of weapons, though, we've got stub guns. That's the only pistols we've got in the game for this fighter type. And special weapons, they have no basic weapons. They only have access to 1 special weapon, and that is the Storm Welder, which is 75 credits and is just crazy. It's an absolutely crazy weapon. It's very unreliable. It blows up in your hands. And it is reckless, so it can just hit your own guys if you're not careful too. So for 75 credits, I think that's just an absolute no-no for me. But if you want to play fun and silly, then go for it. But ballistic skill 5 plus as well, no thanks. Close combat weapon wise, we've got the fighting knife or a heavy rock saw. So 120 credits for a heavy rock saw on a fighter that's 35 credits. No thanks. Don't get it. I mean, the models come with heavy rock saws and storm welders. They're not great models, actually. I think they're actually the weakest models for the Goliath range too. So if I was to buy that box, I'd keep the stimmers and I'd chuck those in the bin or give them to someone who's actually going to use them. War gear options, we've got frag grenades, incendiary charges, which is nice to have on these guys, but again, ballistic skill 5, it's not great. We've got smoke grenades, crack grenades, and armoured undersuits, bio boosters, and filter plugs. So not a lot of options there. In fact, hardly any options. Stub guns and fighting knives, sure, but I can't see a place for these guys in a Goliath list. The reason why I can't see a place for them is because we have Goliath Juves as well, which are called bullies, and we're going to get into those right away. Now your Goliath, we're actually going to move, we'll skip the ganger for now and we'll go to the bully, because I just want to compare these two. Now the bully's the same price, it's 35 credits and has the same rules. The only thing he doesn't have, obviously, is he's not a prospect, so he doesn't have the cool triggering thing when you get taken out of action. This guy's stats are pretty much the same, really. He's got the same movement, the same weapon skill and ballistic skill actually, but he's got higher strength. So he's got a strength of 4, toughness 4, wounds 1, initiative 4, so slightly, it's the same initiative actually. And then he's got a leadership 9, 7 cool, willpower, and intelligence 9. So he's 35 credits, but he's got a better strength. So for me, that's already ticking the box. He's got a better strength and a lower movement. It's really down to you whether you want the movement or the strength. I think the strength is better on these guys personally, because it means they can throw grenades further and hit you harder. These guys do get ferocity skills as well, so that's their main primary skill tree if you want to do that, and ferocity is just so much better than combat if you ask me, in this case. In terms of pistols, they also get the same. They get the stub gun. The stub guns are good on both of these fighters, whether it's a bully or a forge-born or whatever they're called, because they're +2 to hit at close range, so that's always nice. It goes from 5 up to a 3 up. And in terms of close combat, they've got axes, brute cleavers, fighting knives, mauls, and spudjackers, and that's it. You can just have a stub gun and an axe or something like that, but that does make them a pretty cheap, fairly effective, decent close combat fighter with a good strength of 4 and an average weapon skill too. So actually, filling out your gang with some of these cheaper fighters, the bullies, I think is actually a really viable thing to do. And personally, I would always take a bully over a forgeborn. But we're not getting into the gene smithing just yet, but just based on these stats right here and the access to what you can get, I would say the bully is just better for me anyway. But again, I'd like to know your comments. I'd like to hear how you use your forgeborn in the game. And there you go, basically. Moving on to the next fighter type and the last fighter type, and that's your generic sort of ganger, and he's called a Bruiser, which is kind of a cool name. These guys are 55 credits, so they're quite expensive. It's worth mentioning that the cost for all of these fighters is quite a lot, but that's Goliath. They are more of an elite gang, so you are going to be running quite light on numbers, but it doesn't matter because you've got really, really good cool and they're really, really tough. So your Goliath Bruiser, this is your average ganger. He's got a movement of 4 as well, a weapon skill ballistic skill of 4, a strength and toughness of 4, so that really stands out for Goliath there as well. Wounds of 1, initiative of 4, attacks 1, a leadership 8, a cool of 5, which is insanely good, again like best cool for a ganger, and a willpower of 9 and intelligence of 8, so terrible on those ones there as well, but it doesn't really matter when you've got a cool of 5, it's pretty awesome. You can have a specialist, so one of these specialists, on creation you can have a specialist with a special weapon, probably a grenade launcher in their case I would say, so these guys get access to ferocity skills again and brawn. So ferocity and brawn across the board is generally the skill choices for Goliath. Secondary skills are combat and shooting, interestingly. But the equipment list for a Bruiser is just a stripped back version of what you have on your sort of average champion, I suppose. But for basic weapons, we've got bolt guns, which is really nice to have. We've got combat shotguns again for 60 credits, which is very, very valuable, particularly on these Bruisers. Combat shotguns are excellent, especially the template. We've also got normal shotguns and stub cannons as well, which we're going to get into shortly, for 20 credits. Bolt pistols, hand flamers and stub guns, so hand flamers can be really viable on these guys too. In terms of special weapons for your specialist, we have a flamer, a grenade launcher and a melter gun. So you can have a melter gun on a general specialist, which is kind of cool, but you've only got average ballistic skill. Just remember that. It's quite a lot of credits. A melter gun, 135 credits. Close combat weapons, we've got the axe, the brute cleaver, the fighting knife, a maul, spudjacker, and your two-handed axe and two-handed hammer, which are garbage. We've also got, for grenades, again, more viable for Goliaths because you can throw them a lot further. You can throw incendiary charges, which are 40 credits. You can throw them 12 inches and they're a 5-inch template, so that's really, really tasty. Don't spam these things though, because you will have no friends. Same with hand flamers. I say this in every single video. And you've got furnace plates for 5 credits there. So the only armor option, generally speaking, for Goliaths is furnace plates, and they're pretty good. For 5 credits, they're excellent. But we can also take stim slug stashes on pretty much everybody. We've got photo goggles, respirators, filter plugs, armoured undersuits and drop rigs as well. And you can have a telescopic sight on these guys as well. So that is your Bruiser. So we've done all of the different fighter types there. We're then going to move on to the next bit. So we've talked about all the different fighter types for your Goliath gang list there. The next thing we're going to talk about is your exotic beastie. So this one is a Sump Croc. Every house gets one. For Orlok, you have the Cyber Mastiffs, which we talked about being overpriced and fairly annoying as they're overpriced by that much. This guy though, the Sump Croc, is quite interesting. I quite like it. I think it's one of the better pets. It's quite similar to a Cyber Mastiff. It's just a lot better, and it's, a much better cost here. So this guy is 130 credits, which is still quite expensive for what it does, but it's not bad. It's not bad. Here are the stats for the Sump Croc anyway. It's movement 4, so it's the same speed as your Goliath who's handling it. It's got a weapon skill of 3, which is excellent. We've got a strength and toughness of 4, so very similar to a Goliath here as well. But it's got 2 wounds. So all of a sudden, when you compare that to a Cyber Mastiff with only 1 wound, this guy has 2 wounds, which is excellent. So 130 credits compared to 100 credits. Suddenly the value is starting to come through for this guy. We've also got Initiative of 6 up, which is terrible, but it is a crocodile. We've got 2 attacks as well, which is nice. In terms of the mental stats, we've got a leadership of 8, a cool of 6, which is better than average, willpower of 7, and an intelligence of 11. So not very smart, certainly not going to be opening any security doors anytime soon or hacking any terminals. This guy has a couple of special rules. First of all, he's got scaly hide, which means he's got a 5 up, so he's effectively got mesh armor there. And countercharge, which is actually pretty cool. So countercharge, if the Sump Croc's owner is engaged by an enemy fighter as the result of an enemy fighter making a charge double action, and if the Sump Croc is standing inactive, it may immediately activate and make a charge double action moving towards the charging enemy fighter. At the end of this movement, the Sump Croc has engaged the enemy fighter. It may immediately attack as normal for a fighter performing a charge. This activation interrupts the enemy's action being performed before it attacks. It's really, really powerful, but who's going to charge a Goliath leader or a champion? You're not often going to do that, are you? So, but this just guarantees that no one wants to do that at all, because the Sump Croc's going to get in the way. If that Death Maiden really wants to go for your leader and there's a Sump Croc there, then awesome. Really cool skill to have. This guy gets Brawn as a skill access primary as well. But that's it. They come with Ferocious Jaws. And Ferocious Jaws are, I think they've got Rending. They could be damage too. But definitely rending there. Now moving on to your sort of hangers-on and whatnot. In terms of your sort of gang-specific hangers-on here. In fact, this guy's not gang-specific, but first up we've got the Brute Handler, which is 55 credits. He's available to any gang, but at a cost of 110 credits. So to Goliaths, he's half price, 55 credits. Now this guy, what he does is he trains your brutes basically. So a gang with a brute handler can train their brutes between games, providing the brute is not in recovery. The controlling player can make a willpower check for any of their brutes using the brute's unmodified willpower. If the check is failed, the brute gains D3 experience. Now brutes generally have low willpower, so that's pretty cool. If the check is passed, the brute proves too willful and the training doesn't work. So you've got to lose that roll to actually gain the XP. In addition though, if a standing and active brute handler is on the battlefield and within 3 inches of a friendly brute, the brute gains the Nerves of Steel skill and can re-roll any leadership, cool, willpower, and intelligence checks, which is really cool. But again, this guy's not going to be on the battlefield very much. He's not very good either. He's kind of like a Goliath Juve in a lot of ways in terms of his stats, so I'm not even going to read them out, if you can imagine a bully. And in terms of equipment, he comes with a shock whip as well, but he also has the Iron Jaw skill, which is a fairly useless skill in the game, meaning that your unarmed attacks against him are less potent basically. We've then got a Chem Dealer, which is pretty cool. He's 25 credits to House Goliath, but he's 50 credits to anyone else. And this guy provides your gang with a steady supply of chems. So a gang with a chem dealer counts chems as common, all chems as common, which is really awesome. Chem dealers can also, in a pinch, acquire chems on consignment during pre-battle sequence of a game. This allows the gang to buy a single dose of any chem or items containing chems, such as a single stim slug stash or Medicaid kit, without expending any credits. Wow, that's awesome. Really good for 25 credits, isn't it? You get a free stim slug stash each game. I'll take that. However, during the post-battle action step of the post-battle sequence, the gang must pay for these items. Okay, right, so I haven't actually read this. As you can tell, I'm reading this for the first time, so that's your chem dealer. I tend to miss out on hangers-on a lot of the time. I don't tend to read them too much. I find that it overcomplicates my campaign play, but I probably should. But this guy comes with a stub gun and is equipped with a single dose of any chem chosen from the black market if he starts the game. He's also got the Fixer skill as well, which, hang on a minute, Fixer gives you D3 times 10 credits in post-battle, so he's worth having just for that, because he's 25 credits to have in your gang, but you get money for having him. So he pays for himself very quickly. The next one, and this is house specific, only to House Goliath, is a pit trainer. This guy's 75 credits, so it's quite a lot. But what he does is he's got a special rule called Combat Ready. A gang containing A pit trainer can train fighters between battles. Up to 3 fighters who are not in recovery can be trained at once. A fighter who undergoes training gains a random skill generated from their primary or secondary skill lists, or secondary, that's excellent, for the next battle a fighter takes part in. This is a temporary skill and is removed from the fighter's card at the end of the battle. If the generated skill is one they already have, they may instead choose the temporary skill from the primary. Wow, that's really cool. Just for the battle though. However, when a fighter trains for the pit, there is a chance they will be injured. Roll a d6 for each fighter. On a 1, the fighter must immediately make a lasting injury roll and apply the results. If the fighter suffers an injury that puts them into recovery, they must miss the next battle. So there is a risk to that, but it's pretty cool. Is it worth 75 credits? Yeah, it could be. It could be. Up to 3 fighters. It's not bad. If you're rolling deep, you've got a big crew and you can not have to worry about those. I think giving bullies, cheaper fighters, that training could be pretty cool. Could be pretty lucrative. But again, comment, let me know. We've then got dome runners, rogue docks, your standard sort of hangers-on for stuff. We've got ammo jacks, gang lookouts, and sloppers as well. Those are available to all gangs, so I'm not going to go into those. You know what those do. In terms of brutes, we've got the Goliath specific brute, which this guy's called a Zerker. He's basically a bigger version of your Stimmer. But to be honest, at 210 credits, I'd rather just take a Stimmer instead of this guy, because he has a similar role. And this guy can't take Nerves of Steel out of the box either, so that's a problem for me. Now this guy's stats are movement 4, weapon skill 3, so not actually as good as the Stimmer on that front. Ballistic skill 6, but he can't shoot. But he's got strength 6, toughness 5, 3 wounds, an initiative of 5, tax 3, leadership 7, cool 6, willpower 8, intelligence 10. And he comes with 2 open fists. Now this guy's basically the Incredible Hulk. He's just a massive, juiced up, roided up fuckwit. And he also has the combat stash thing as well, where he can have plus D3 attacks as well. But if he rolls a natural 1, then he only gets 1 attack. So same as your Stimmer. It's really weird actually, because these guys fill a similar role as your Stimmer, so I can't really see a place for this brute in the gang. Personally, I'd rather take an Ambot or something else, which is much better. This guy has Brawn as a primary and Muscle as a primary as well, but he is a brute as well. He comes with the Impetuous skill. Impetuous is quite an interesting skill. It gives you a 4-inch consolidation instead of a 2-inch consolidation, which is okay, but it's certainly not a tier 1 skill. You can upgrade this guy to have mutated fists and bone spurs for 70 credits though, so you're looking at 280 credits with that. Does mean that he's got versatile though, so he's got more threat range and stuff though. And he can take furnace plates for 10 credits and a stim slug stash for 20 credits as well, so very expensive, and you can just pin him with las guns every turn because he is pinnable. So your Stimmer, by contrast, who can get Nerves of Steel and has a cool of 4+, is not getting pinned and is getting into combat and is probably doing just as much damage, to be honest, as well. So a hard miss for me on that brute, I must say. It's just not that good. It's a real shame that you don't get something different to add to Goliaths on that front. However, Goliaths do not need any help in terms of power. You do get access, of course, to your Ambot, and they are 215 credits. And you also get your Ogryn as well, which is actually cheaper to House Goliath, 180 credits instead of 210, which does make them slightly better. And Goliaths are good friends with Ogryns generally because they're their muscle-bound mates. This book, it's worth mentioning, this book does include the rules for the Ogryn, Slave Ogryn gangs as well, so it's a really good book on that front, because it's the only House of book, I think, that actually does contain the rules for 2 working factions in the game. So again, another reason to go and get this from Games Workshop, because it's a fantastic book. Moving on to the next bit now. So just touching on muscle skills quickly. Muscle skills are available to Ogryns and to Goliaths actually. And there are 6 in the tree, as there are in any sort of skill tree here. We're just going to go through these quickly. I think I have done this already with the Ogryns, but if you haven't watched that video, then watch this one as well, because it's also got muscle skills in it. So here we go. First one is Fists of Steel. Now this one I actually quite like. It's pretty cool on a Stimmer actually too, if you think about it. Unarmed attacks made by this fighter count as having strength 2 higher than normal and inflict 2 damage. So you could give that to a Stimmer and it would be quite interesting, and cut back on some credit cost there as well. However, you're missing out on Nerves of Steel if you do that. The next one is Iron Man. This fighter's toughness is not reduced by flesh wounds. However, if this fighter suffers a number of flesh wounds equal to their toughness, they will go out of action as normal. That's really good. It means that they're hard to wound throughout the game, and the flesh wounds do not affect how hard to wound they are. Really, really good one, actually. The next one is called Immovable Stance. This one's kind of hilarious. You can do a double action called Tank, and what this does, until the start of this fighter's next activation, this fighter increases their armor save by 2 to a maximum of 2+, and cannot be moved from their current locations by any skill such as Hurl or Overseer or any weapon that has knockback or drag, nor can they be pinned. So it's a double action to just stand there and be an absolute beast and just go, ugh, and you can't be moved and you can't be pinned, and you've got a much better save. It's interesting. It's interesting. If you're out in the open and you just want to, I don't know, I can see a few instances for this being useful, but it's a funny one. It's a funny one. The next one's really good though. This is called Naga, which I don't know what that means, but it's clearly an Ogryn saying. During this fighter's activation, they may attempt to perform a third action after completing the first 2. Roll a d6. If the dice roll is equal to or less than the toughness they are performing the action, then they perform the action. If the roll is greater than their toughness or is a 6, their activation ends immediately, whether or not they were successful. When their activation ends, the fighter is automatically pinned, so and it cannot be negated by Nerves of Steel either. So that's pretty cool. It's better for Ogryns than it is for Goliaths, because Ogryns have an even higher toughness, so really you need a 5 or below with an Ogryn, whereas a 4 or less with a Goliath. However, we do have gene smithing that we're going to be talking about very soon, so you can up your toughness and make that skill more valuable, but it's a really good skill, and that's available for your stimmers. The next one's kind of hilarious as well. It's called Unleash the Beast. You get to flex, a simple action. All fighters, friend or foe, in base contact with this fighter must pass a strength check to be pushed D3 inches away, which is quite funny. Yeah, incredibly situational. To be honest, I'd rather just punch someone in the face with close combat attacks than flex, but it's interesting. It's fluffy, it's fun. The next one is Walk It Off, and I really, really like this one. Should the fighter perform 2 or more move actions, so if you move, double move there, you can make a toughness check, and at the end of the activation, if the check is passed, this fighter may recover 1 lost wound or flesh wound. Fantastic skill there for keeping your fighters alive. I really like that one on your leader, but it's great for Goliaths too. So, moving on to the next bit, and here's where things get very interesting for House of Goliath. Okay, so onto the unique mechanic for House Goliath here. Now, with Escher we have Chem Alchemy, with Vansar we have Cyber Technica, with Delac we have Psychoterica, but with House Goliath we have arguably the best one, probably the most fun one, and certainly the most abusable one as well, if you really want to be this guy. Now, there are 3 types of Goliaths. There are vat-born, which means that you're born in a vat, you have a shorter lifespan, and generally speaking, you're just a genetically modified brute guy, and it's 0 credits to be vat-born, basically. So you don't have to pay extra to be vat-born, but with each of these different types of Goliaths, you have to choose on their creation. So just a quick note on gene smithing: you can't gene smith someone later on during a campaign. They are born this way. So this is the way they come, and what you do with them is dictated when you make your starting list. Now, the next type is called Nat-born. Now, Nat-born is where you have a fighter that is actually born with a mother, a mummy and a daddy. And these guys tend to live a lot longer, and they are kind of like the slightly more well-respected Goliath fighters. They're still big and strong, but they have longevity in terms of their lives, and they are generally they generally get into higher up positions in terms of the hierarchy in House Goliath because they live longer, basically. And it's plus 20 credits to make someone Nat-born. The third option, though, is unborn. Now, what does unborn mean? Of course, they were born, but they were born outside of House Goliath, so they don't have the same genetic makeup as House Goliath. They come in from an outside perspective and submit themselves to all the rigorous chemicals and training ordeals that Goliaths have to go through to make themselves so big and strong. These guys, it's plus 10 credits to have someone who is unborn. So You do have to pay to get access to these things first, and the best one is basically your Natborn at plus 20 credits, and then you have your Unborn at plus 10 credits. So we're going to go into the Vatborn stuff first. Now, Vatborn fighters, like I mentioned, are your baseline Goliath fighters. So these guys are the most simple and the most common of your Goliath fighters. These guys only live about 10 years, which is kind of sad, really, when you think about it. But when you're living in the Underhive, you're probably not going to live much past 30 anyway if you're just a regular guy. So anyway, getting into your Vatborn gene smithing. Now, what gene smithing is you pay or you deduct credits from the fighter's cost to either give them stats or take away stats. It's pretty cool. It's really, really cool. It's very min-maxy, but it's a really nice way to add flavor to your gang. But it can be seriously abused, and just be mindful of being that guy in a campaign. So anyway, the first one is reduced bone density. So this is minus 10 credits. So if you take this on a Vatborn fighter who is a normal base cost, doesn't have to pay extra for being Vatborn, this takes 10 credits off their cost, which is pretty cool. What it does though, is it reduces this fighter's starting strength characteristic or toughness by 1. Minus 10 credits for strength or toughness, it's not great. I think personally I'd rather lose strength than toughness in most instances. So it's definitely good if you want to cut some costs on some things, but it's not your best one. 10 credits is not a lot. You're only going to squeeze in an axe for the cost of that, really. But if you really do need those credits, then sure. The next one is Corrupted Slug. So this is minus 5 credits, and this will increase the fighter's cool by 1, but reduce intelligence by 1. That's pretty good. In fact, that's really good. Sorry, I'm actually reading the wrong one. Moving back, Corrupted Slug, sorry. Minus 5 credits, reduce this fighter's leadership, willpower, and intelligence by 1. Okay, you're not really using those 3 stats that often, so you could do that, but it's only 5 credits. I think if that was minus 10 credits, I'd use it, most definitely. The next one is Fearless but Foolish, and this is the one that I just mistakenly looked at. This is plus 5 credits, and you get to increase your cool by 1. But reduce your intelligence by 1. I think that's really good for 5 credits, because I mean suddenly you've got a ganger who's cool 5, you can make him cool 4. Ouch. Really, really good. But you're cool enough anyway. Do you really need that? Probably not. The next one is Genetic Ancient. So this is plus 10 credits. What this does is increase the fighter's leadership, willpower, and intelligence by 1. But it's 10 credits to do so. Still very, very valuable for what it does. I mean, it's far cheaper than it would be to level up. I think this is the thing about gene smithing, is it's cheaper in credit cost, far, far cheaper to do all of this stuff than it is to actually level up a fighter with their stats this way. Far cheaper. So that's Genetic Ancient. Hardened Immune System, this is plus 5 credits. This is excellent, actually. But hits from weapons with gas and toxin only ever affect the fighter on a 6. That's fantastic, really, really good. No matter what, whether there's chem alchemy, chem synths and stuff involved, it means that you're only ever hurt on a 6, which is really cool. So that's great to have on your leaders and champs too, especially if you've got lots of Escher or Dlac even in your campaign. The next one we've got Hyper Healing. So this is plus 15 credits. And you get to choose, you get to roll 2 injury dice in the recovery phase and choose the result. In addition, during the post-battle sequence, if this fighter has any lasting injuries, roll a d6, and on a 6 the fighter can heal one of their lasting injuries. Fantastic for 15 credits, I think that's excellent. Again, really good on your leader. The next one is Nerve Burnout, so this is minus 5 credits, and this reduces the fighter's cool by 1, so yeah, I mean you can do that if you really want to. The next one is Dermal Hardening, this one's excellent, so this increases your toughness by 1, and it's only 10 credits to do that. Fantastic, you can do that. You could spam that a lot and have toughness 5 gangers. Don't do it though. Next one is Terminal Biology, so minus 10 credits. And basically your body's starting to fail them as you get older. You're nearly 10 years old. If you suffer a lasting injury, roll a d6, and on a roll of 1, the fighter perishes and removed from the gang's roster. So there you go. And the last one is Overdeveloped Musculature. So this is plus 5 credits for this. And what you do is you increase your strength by 1 but reduce your initiative by 1. So not bad. So initiative 5 on a ganger but strength 5 is pretty good. I'll take that one. And that's your Vatborn basically. So Vatborn is free to be Vatborn, and some of those are really, really good options for you know, bringing down the fighter's cost or raising it up and giving them more toughness and stuff there as well. So as you can see, it could really, really be abused on your generic fighters. However, it gets even more abusable now with your Natborn. Now remember, it's 20 credits to make yourself Natborn, but some of the bonuses you can get here are fantastic. It's really, really good. So yeah, what can you say? First of all, you get a couple of bonuses for being Natborn though. You're paying 20 credits not just for the access to the gene smithing, but you're paying 20 credits for the access to these little special abilities as well. So Natborn alter their starting characteristics by increasing their intelligence by 2, increasing their willpower by 1, and decreasing their cool by 1. So that's pretty cool. And they've also got this physical perfection rule as well. So Natborn have the blessing of near perfect flesh and can build their muscles faster than any other Goliath subtypes. Natborn leaders, champions and prospects, Juves and specialists can increase their strength and toughness at a cost of 6 XP rather than 8 XP. So when they level up, it's only 6 XP to do so. When Natborn gangers gain advancements, they can either roll on the ganger advancement table or increase their strength or toughness by 1 as well. So you can choose either way. When added to the gang, Natborn fighters can choose from any of the Genesmith upgrades below at the credit cost. So we're going to go into those now. The first one is Adaptive Biology. So this is plus 10 credits for this one. The fighter may re-roll any strength or toughness checks they are required to take. Hits from weapons with gas or toxin must re-roll the dice to see if they inflict an injury. So that's pretty cool. For 10 credits, I like that one. Adaptive Mind, plus 5 credits here. This one, the fighter counts their secondary skill set as primary, so that's pretty cool, especially when some fighters in Goliath lists get access to shooting, which is an excellent skill tree. That is excellent for 5 credits. So you could give that to your Goliath leader with a heavy bolter and all of a sudden give him shooting skills. For example, that's just one idea that I've got there. Alpha's Lineage, this one's plus 20 credits to do, and this one gives you a group activation basically, so it's quite a lot, but it can give you plus 1 to your group activation. If you're a leader, you group activate 3, champion group activate 2. If you're a ganger, you can group activate 1 all of a sudden, which is kind of cool, but that's all it does. It also counts the leadership skill set as one of their primary skill sets as well, so you could give a ganger Iron Will or something eventually, I don't know, but yeah. That's quite cool, but I don't think it's worth 20 credits personally. The next one is Iron Flesh. This is plus 10 credits, and you can increase your wounds by 1 for 10 credits. Now, wounds is very, very expensive to increase. Wounds and attacks are both, 12 XP to increase in the game normally, and cost, I think, 50 credits onto your fighter's. I think it's 50 credits onto your fighter's value. This is 10 credits. And you get plus 1 wound. That's fantastic, and you could really abuse that and have a load of guys with plus 1 wound. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the pick of the bunch, really, isn't it? Over-engineered, this is minus 10 credits. When this fighter must roll on the lasting injury table, they must roll twice and accept the highest result. That's pretty nasty, but it's minus 10 credits. I don't know. Prime Specimen. This fighter is a perfect example of their kind and represents the ideal that Goliaths aspire to. This fighter can improve one of their characteristics by 1, plus 10 credits. So any characteristic can be increased by 1 there. An interesting one there as well. So you could do like weapon skill there, for example, which isn't an option elsewhere. You could do movement, things like that, like stats that you can't increase outside of this one. You also got rapid muscle growth here. This is plus 5 credits. This fighter can increase their strength characteristic by up to 3 points rather than the usual 2. So you can eventually get a plus 3 strength fighter instead of a plus 2, which is usually the roof, the ceiling, should I say, of where you can increase to. The next one is Redundant Organs. So this one is plus 15 credits. When this fighter must roll on the lasting injury table, they must roll twice and accept the lower result. So the opposite of the one I just mentioned a minute ago. Over-engineered, I think it was. So there's that one, that's pretty cool. The next one is the Tyrant's Own. So this is plus 20 credits. This one's quite expensive, but This fighter can improve any 2 of their characteristics by 1. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So you're basically paying for 2 stat increases instead of 1 in the case of Prime Specimen. And the last one is Tyrant's Pride. So this is minus 20 credits, and only a leader can take it. But you can't take any champions in your gang. So minus 20 credits and you can't have any champions. Suddenly that makes, yeah, that nerfs Goliath so heavily because you can't have stimmers and stuff. But it's doable. I mean, if you really want to min-max, you could do that and get rid of your stimmers and your champions and then have a load of gangers with extra wounds and extra toughness and stuff as well. So there you go. Now, the last type of gene smithing here is your unborn. Now these are the guys that are kind of outsiders to House Goliath and trying the hardest to get in and be muscle-bound idiots. These guys, remember, it's plus 10 credits for these guys. And they're outsiders. So unborn fighters can choose to have an additional primary skill set chosen from agility, brawn, combat, cunning, ferocity, shooting, or savant. However, unborn fighters may never select skills from the muscle skill group. I think that's an excellent extra to pay. 10 credits for that on its own is worth it for me. So unborn is already excellent for me. Yeah, and these are the following gene smithing upgrades that you can get for unborn fighters. Data Slug Overlay. So this is minus 10 credits. When a fighter activates for the first time in a battle, they must make an intelligence check. If the check is failed, they become subject to insane. Not great, especially when you have such low intelligence of usually like an 8 or a 9 in most instances. Don't do that one. Insanity's horrible. Doc's Experiment. This one sounds kind of fun. This is plus 5 credits. You can increase one characteristic by 1 and decrease the other characteristic by 1 out of movement, strength, toughness, and wounds. Interesting. It's plus 5 credits. You can totally do that. You cannot choose a characteristic to decrease if doing so would lower it to 0, obviously. Doc's Failure. This is minus 10 credits here. Select 2 of the following characteristics: movement, strength, toughness, and wounds. Decrease both by 1. You cannot choose a characteristic to be. So minus 10 credits. It's pretty painful, that one though. The next one is Genetic Outsider. This is minus 5 credits for this one. This fighter cannot use the group activation thing at all. So there you go. It's not too bad actually. Of course, only a Forged Tyrant or Forged Boss can take this one. You can't just give it to a ganger. Obviously that wouldn't work. It would be cheating if you did that anyway. I don't think that's too bad. I would probably give that to my Stimmer. Oh no, your Stimmer doesn't have it. So you give it to your champions if you want to. There's only 5 credits, so that's not really going to make a huge amount of difference. Moving on to Malformed. This is plus 5 credits. This fighter can increase their strength characteristic by 1, but reduce their initiative by 1. That's really good. Pretty good one. The next one is Proto Goliath. This is minus 10 credits. And what this does is increase the fighter's movement by 1, reduce their strength by 1, reduce toughness by 1, reduce cool by 2, and increase their intelligence by 2, and increase their willpower by 1. So a lot to take in there, but what that does is it effectively makes your Goliath more of a general human. So it ups their movement and some of their mental stats at the cost of their strength, toughness, etc. So it's interesting. Minus 10 credits, you can do that. It means that you can have kind of like your average stat line fighters in your crew, which is not so bad for minus 10 credits, to be honest. So there you go. So your gang has 55 credits, suddenly he's 45 credits. I don't know. I'd rather just keep the Goliath ganger, to be honest, personally, but it depends how far you want to take the min-maxing, I suppose. The next one is excellent. This is Scar Tissue. So reduce the damage of all hits suffered by 1 to a minimum of 1. So this is effectively like True Grit, but better. The next one we have Survivor. So this is plus 10 credits. When making recovery tests for this fighter, they can re-roll one of the injury dice. So that's pretty cool. Plus 10 credits for that one as well. Plus 5 credits for Stim Implant. What this one does is they can choose to increase their strength by 2 until the end of the round. However, if they do, they must roll a d6 in the end phase. On a 4+, they will suffer a flesh wound. It's 5 credits. Nah, I don't really see the value in that one, but it's kind of cool. It's a shame it's not like an actual Stim Slug stash in the movement and everything else, because that would have been excellent. And the last one in the entire gene smithing list, I'm tired after going through all of these, to be honest, is 2 lives plus 5 credits. So this one's really interesting actually. Whenever this fighter gains a skill as an advancement or for free during game creation, randomly generate a second skill from their primary or secondary skill sets. Make a note on this fighter's card. The two skills are a pair. Whenever this fighter is selected to take part in a battle, one of these skills determined at random will be forgotten. To determine which skill is forgotten, assign one blah blah blah. So do a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's quite cool. So you can have options. So you turn up and you never know which skill's going to turn up with your fighter. Really, really cool. And that is gene smithing in a nutshell. Of course, I haven't done a lot of gene smithing, but I'm fully aware of how abusable it is. And I've seen people on all sorts of forums talking about their starting Goliath lists, and they are absolutely fucking hideous, quite frankly. But there you go, that's gene smithing. Whew. I'm not sure quite how long this video is going to be, but I'm sure it won't be quite as long as the cooler one that I did. But we've just done gene smithing, and now, sorry about that, a bit random feather just flew in front of me. Now we're going to be doing the weapons, or the Goliath specific weapons at the very least anyway, and there's a few of them to get through. But first off, we're going to start with the stub cannon actually, which is unique to House Goliath. Now this is a basic weapon that's available to all your fighters, and it's only 20 credits, so it's actually quite affordable. It's got a short range of 9 inches and a long range of 18 inches, so kind of similar to a shotgun, I suppose, in terms of its long range at least. We've got a strength of 5 though, so it's nice and strong. No AP, damage 1, a 3+ ammo check and knockback, so it's quite an interesting weapon. It's only 1 hit, so there's no rapid fire there, and it's only 1 damage and there's no AP, which does make it a little bit meh. But having such high strength is great, particularly if you're playing against other Goliaths who've got toughness 4 across the board. Suddenly you're wounding toughness 4 fighters on 3s with this thing. And the other thing I quite like about it is it's got a 3-up ammo, which is nice and reliable. And knockback too, which is also very good. For 20 credits, it's not bad at all. If you want to cut the cost on some basic weapons, it's quite a good basic weapon there. But I'd much rather take a shotgun for 30 credits, I think, just to have the options on different types of ammunition, and also having damage 2 on that solid as well is such a valuable thing to have. So that's the stub cannon. In terms of other weapons that are specific to House Goliath, I'm just going to go through and find a couple. You got your Storm Welder here. We know what a Storm Welder does. It is it's reckless, it has shock, it has unstable, it's rapid fire 3, it's strength 5, it's just insane, and it's quite likely to blow up in your hands or hit your other guys. Heavy weapons here though, the one that sticks out, in fact there are 2 Goliath specific ones here. The first one is only available to your stimmers, and that's the assault grenade launchers, or the twin-linked assault grenade launchers. You've got stun rounds on this, which are short range 6, long range 18, strength 2, -1 AP, damage 1, 4-up ammo, concussion and rapid fire 1. Quite interesting. The concussion obviously reduces your initiative by 2, so if you're shooting at people on the edges of stuff, they're very likely to fall over. So that's nice. We've also got the frag version as well, which has got 24-inch range top, -1 at short range. The same as a grenade launcher, strength 3, damage 1, 6-up ammo, blast 3 inches, knockback and rapid fire though, which is really, really cool. However, it gains the unstable trait, which is very annoying, so this can blow up and kill your stimmer if you're not too careful. But rapid fire frag grenades, what's not to like about that? Very, very cool. And you can get crack and smoke for that as well. Moving on to the crumper, or rivet cannon as it's also known. This thing is the very, very close range heavy weapon, which you can move and shoot with. It doesn't require a suspenser, but it's got a 3-inch short range and a 9-inch long range, so it's very, very short range. It's +2 to hit close up on both of the profiles. It's got 2 different profiles here. And the first profile is rapid fire, so this is strength 4, -1 AP, damage 2, 3-up ammo, rapid fire and rending. So it's absolutely hideous if you get hit by it. Even on the lower profile, it's really nasty. Rending, 2 damage, strength 4, rapid fire, nasty, 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 worse than a bolt gun. However, you've got the superheated version as well, which is strength 6, -2 AP, 2 damage, 3+, blaze and rending. So both are really, really tasty, but just that that range of 9 inches makes it kind of unusable in a lot of cases. If you're playing on smaller boards, if you're playing on smaller boards, it's excellent. If you're playing on bigger boards, it's terrible. So there you go. So those are your heavy weapons. Moving on to your close combat weapons, there's a few for House Goliath. So the first one we're going to look at is the Brute Cleaver, actually, which was specific to House Goliath. Similar to an axe. This one is +1 to hit though. It gives you your same strength. So basically it's +1 to hit and -1 AP with disarm. So it's actually the same as a sword, but has disarm instead of parry. So there you go. So that's your Brute Cleaver. You've also got your, where are we? Pulverizer. So the next one is your Pulverizer Serrated Axe. This one is strength +1, -1 AP, and pulverize. Pulverize, you can re-roll flesh wounds into serious injuries if you can. We've also got paired pulverize as well, which is exactly the same, but they're paired, so you get double your attacks characteristic, which is pretty tasty. We've then got the Renderizer, which is excellent. It's basically a big version of the Pulverizer. The Renderizer is strength +2 though, so strength 6 on your average Goliath, so meaning that you're wounding most fighters on a 2. It's -1 AP and it's 2 damage with Pulverize, so very, very nice, but it's unwieldy, is the only sort of downside to that. Otherwise, you've got your Spudjacker. Now this is specific to House Goliath as well. It's a giant monkey wrench. I really like Spudjackers actually. They are +1 strength, only 1 damage, no AP, and they've got knockback though. So you can really do extra damage with these if you line people up against walls and into their own fighters and whatnot. It's quite useful, that one. And you can have paired ones as well, which is really cool. So House Goliath, in summary then. In terms of are they beginner friendly or not, I would say a definite yes. They're right up there with House Orlok, to be honest, in terms of the sort of simplicity. I also think they're quite forgiving for beginners with that high toughness and high strength, etc. You will probably get frustrated with the lack of movement, but to be honest, even without gene smithing, they are a very, very, very strong gang, if not one of the best gangs in the game. So bear that in mind. In terms of the sort of weapons and equipment that you might outfit a typical sort of Goliath gang with, and we're not going to include gene smithing in this, I would say your leader's a pretty good all-rounder. He's very solid in close combat, obviously, but he's also quite good at shooting too. And I would suggest giving him the option of the heavy weapon if you do want to go down the heavy weapon route. Perhaps a heavy bolter would be a good choice. I think the heavy bolter, for its cost, is probably the most effective heavy weapon in the game. Or a heavy stubber if you really want to go down that route. Other than that though, I think that's probably it. If you don't want to go down the heavy weapon route with your leader and have a slightly more, more numbers or slightly lighter crew, I would suggest maybe giving him a bolt gun or a grenade launcher with a close combat weapon, perhaps a chain axe as backup as well, which are excellent. In terms of your sort of generic champion, that's a bit of a weird one. Again, your Stimmer is really the close combat powerhouse in your gang, so paired pulverizers or paired Spudjackers are, I'd say, the optimal choice on the Stimmer, with Nerves of Steel as your starting skill. On your generic champions though, I would probably just go with, again, something quite balanced like your leader. You definitely want to be making use of that higher weapon skill, so I would perhaps give them a Renderizer Serrated Axe, and maybe a backup backup shooting weapon perhaps. Be that a stub pistol, stub combi plasma pistol, it would be quite a good option, because they're so much more reliable close up, to negate that lack of ballistic skill perhaps. Other than that, I would probably give Forgeborn a miss. Bullies are great for having stub guns and axes on. They're quite cheap bodies and they're quite efficient at fighting as well, giving you that +1 strength in combat. And stub guns are very good up close, again, like I just mentioned. You do get access to hand flamers and incendiary charges in your gang list as well, so those can be really potent things to take. Again, don't spam them because you won't have many friends left if you do. Combat shotguns are excellent on your gangers. I would say a smattering of combat shotguns is an excellent choice for a Goliath gang. Bolt guns can also be great in terms of their damage dealing, but beware the ammo, the unreliable ammo on a bolt gun. Once they all start failing their ammo and you haven't got any backup weapons, that can be a bit hard to bear as well. Other than that, I think a grenade launcher on your specialist is a really good way to go. I'd highly recommend a grenade launcher in a Goliath list, just to add another template weapon to the mix there as well. Of course, you don't get any sniping weapons like long rifles or long lasers, But your grenade launcher can kind of fill that role a little bit as well, so it's worth bearing that in mind. Now remember, grenades are excellent with Goliath gangs as well, just because you can throw them a lot further. 12-inch grenades are really, really nice, and that's not mentioning gene smithing and upgrading your strength even further than that to throw them even further. So that's worth thinking about. Incendiary charges, frag grenades in fact are pretty good as well for 30 credits, I would say. Throwing them 12 inches is actually really nice, as opposed to your 9 inches on a regular fighter there as well. Other than that though, I think that's probably the most common or typical sort of starting builds there, and those are some of the key weapons that I would take. In summary, I'd say Goliaths are definitely one of the more elite gangs. You're never really going to be starting a gang with more than 6 or 7 fighters, and even then you're probably running quite light. You're not going to be able to fit a heavy weapon into 7 fighters, that's for sure. And you're definitely going to want a stimmer, I would say. If you miss out on a stimmer, I think you're missing a trick there, because they are so potent in melee. But your Goliath leader really is the main deal of your Goliath gang, and he is just an excellent piece in the puzzle there as well, and just a great all-rounder actually. You know, he's not just geared to close combat. Other than that, in terms of tactics cards, Goliaths do get arguably one of the best tactics decks in the game. I'm not going to read any of them out, but there are some excellent tactics cards available to Goliath. One of them, off the top of my head, everybody who's prone gets to stand up. Stuff like that. They've got some really good ones, some very hard-hitting tactics cards as well. But you can use some of the universal ones that give you extra actions to just sort of guarantee getting into combat. Stim slug stashes, on a side note as well, are very good for Goliath, just going back on that, just to guarantee that you get into close combat sometimes as well. But I'm rambling a bit here. I think I've said it all when it comes to House Goliath, really. Again, I'd love to hear your builds, your ideas around House Goliath and how you play them. But for now, I think that's enough for me. So yeah, please like, share, subscribe, and again, thank you very much to all my Patreons out there. I'm soon to be at 1,000 subscribers, I'm sure. I'm only a little way off. So please help me get there, that would be really cool. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.